Hey guys, hi, how are you? Today we're going to take a look back at a vehicle that was truly unlike anything else on the road, the Infiniti FX. This bold, coupe-inspired SUV turned heads and carved out a unique niche in the American market. But it's been gone for a lot of years now, and many enthusiasts, including myself, think that Infiniti is making a huge mistake by not bringing it back. So what made the FX so special? Why did it disappear? And could it make a comeback in today's market? The early 2000s were a time of experimentation in the automotive world, and Infiniti, which was Nissan's luxury arm, was no exception. In 2003, they unleashed the Cheetah, the FX, and it was a breath of fresh air. Forget the boxy traditional SUVs of the time. The FX was sleek, aggressive, and undeniably sporty. Look at it. The long hood, the sharply raked windshield flowing into that coupe-like roofline. The muscular wheel arches housing those big alloy wheels. It looked like a sports car that had somehow been inflated and lifted. It was bold, it was different, and it immediately stood out in a sea of more conservative SUVs. And the iconic interior, dashboard was clean, functional, and it used high-quality materials for its era. You got a well-laid-out instrument cluster that is easy to read. The FX could be opted with nice things like a DVD player for the rear passengers. Now, remember that it's still the early 2000s, so while it didn't have those massive screens of today, whether you think that is a good or bad thing, we cannot deny that it was quite advanced for its time, often featuring a multifunction display for climate control, audio, and vehicle settings. It had nice details like a leather-wrapped steering wheel and the seats. They look rich, luxurious, without being overly bolstered like we see in vehicles today that nobody takes to the track. And of course, it could also be optioned with features like power adjustments, memory settings, and even heated seats depending on the trim level. The rear seats often feature a center armrest with cup holders, adding to the comfort of those in the back, which in my opinion turned this SUV into a G35 that was higher off the ground, a family mover with room for four and their stuff. Actually, the FX offered a practical amount of space for groceries, luggage, or whatever life throws your way, with a cargo capacity that was similar to that of a modern X3. And although it might have looked smaller than the X5 of that same era, it offered more cargo capacity than that BMW. Let's step outside and admire the distinctive styling of the Infiniti FX. This is where the vehicle truly stood out. The profile was sexy with a long hood, which is obligatory in a premium rear-wheel drive vehicle, the swept-back windshield, and the sloping roofline, when few manufacturers were doing this, giving it a very athletic and almost coupe-like appearance. It definitely wasn't your typical boxy SUV. Up front, you got that aggressive grille when manufacturers were not competing for the biggest grille award. The signature Infiniti xenon lights, and a sporty front bumper. It exudes a sense of power and sophistication before vehicles were infested with fake vents and unnecessary cladding. It appeared well planted with a confident stance. Moving to the rear, you'll find those distinctive taillights and sculpted liftgate. The dual exhaust outlets hint the performance. Whether you loved it or found it polarizing, there's no denying that the first generation Infiniti FX had a bold and unique exterior design that helped it carve its own niche in the market. But the FX was not just about the looks. Under the hood, it packed some serious credentials. It could be offered with a 3.5 V6 or a potent 4.5-liter V8. The FX delivered performance that backed up the sporty appearance. It wasn't just a poser, it was generally fun to drive, offering a more engaging experience than many of its contemporaries. And in my opinion, the six-cylinder was the one to get, as the VQ35 is often listed as one of the best engines ever made. Not the most fuel-efficient V6 out there, but a reliable and long-lasting engine it is. These are some of the things that Consumer Reports said about it.
The Infiniti FX 35 delivers a driving experience more reminiscent of a sports sedan than a traditional sport utility vehicle. Its strong and smooth V6 engine provides very quick acceleration.
But Consumer Reports also said that the first generation FX had a stiff ride that transmits pavement imperfections to the passenger, and that the vehicle's exhaust note, intended to sound sporty, can become tiring. About the interior, the press kit describes the interior as being divided into 3 zones: driver zone, comfort zone, and play zone, and then goes on to romanticize the interior, but I do believe that the interior was gorgeous. You can clearly see the Nissan footprint in many areas of the interior. The cockpit felt more like a sports sedan than an SUV, perhaps very similar to the interior of the G35 with well-bolstered seats, a clear instrument cluster, and premium materials. It offered a good balance of luxury and sportiness, appealing to buyers who wanted something a little bit more exciting than your average family hauler. And American buyers responded enthusiastically. The FX quickly became a popular choice for those who wanted a stylish and performance-oriented SUV that wasn't afraid to be different. It carved out a unique space, attracting a clientele that might have otherwise looked at European luxury brands but wanted something with a bit more visual flair and perhaps a slightly more accessible price point. In the early 2000s, there were only a few premium brands offering something similar, and BMW had taken the market by surprise with the X5, and the FX was an exciting alternative at a fraction of the cost. It never sold in big numbers though. It always trailed far behind the RX and the MDX, two safer choices that have proven to be the stronger sellers for Lexus and Acura respectively. Over its lifespan, the FX evolved. Subsequent deliveries refined the design, becoming arguably even more distinctive, but I must admit that the first generation was my favorite of all. Features like the wave-like hood and the signature crescent-cut D-pillar became hallmarks of the model. The engine options continued to impress, and Infiniti kept pushing the boundaries of what a luxury SUV could be. But then something shifted. Sales in the United States started to decline, and in 2017, Infiniti quietly discontinued the FX in the US market, replacing it with the QX50, a more conventional crossover. This left many wondering, what happened? Why did this once popular and groundbreaking vehicle disappear? There are a few theories. Firstly, the market itself changed. The explosion of compact and subcompact crossovers, as well as the rise of more traditionally styled luxury SUVs, might have diluted the FX's unique appeal. Perhaps its bold styling, which was once its biggest strength, became polarizing for a broader audience. Secondly, Infiniti's own brand tragedy might have played a role. The company underwent several shifts in its naming conventions and overall direction. Perhaps the FX no longer fit neatly into their long-term vision, or maybe resources were prioritized towards other segments. In the early 2000s, Nissan was a synonym of quality and reliability, although it had already merged with Renault. Cars like the FX were still projects conceived before the merge. It was made in Japan. And I personally draw a mark on Nissan's reliability issues with the day that they had the misfortune of joining the French automaker. But the FX is a testament of what Infiniti could build before the company went in a different direction, which in this case was downhill. Additionally, the FX was in the US for 15 years, in which it only saw one major redesign. So I would say that this didn't keep the model fresh, but take this for what it's worth, because brands like Lexus stretched their redesigns for just as long and still managed to sell in higher numbers. Finally, increased competition couldn't be ignored. Other manufacturers started offering more stylish and performance-oriented SUVs, potentially chipping away at the FX market share. Brands like BMW with their X Series and even Porsche with the Macan offered a similar blend of sportiness and practicality. But here's where I think that Infiniti is missing out. Look at the current automotive landscape. There's still a huge demand for stylish and engaging SUVs. Think about the success of vehicles that dare to be different, that offer a more emotional connection than just pure practicality. The market is ripe for the revival of the FX Spirit. A bold, coupe-inspired SUV with a focus on driving dynamics could once again carve out a unique niche for Infiniti. Imagine a modern interpretation of the FX, incorporating Infiniti's latest design language, cutting-edge technology, and potent powertrains. Perhaps even a hybrid or an electric variant. The Nissan FX platform is waiting to underpin the new FX. In a sea of increasingly similar-looking SUVs, a resurrected FX could be a true differentiator for Infiniti's, attracting a new generation of buyers who crave something bold and exciting. It could reignite the passion that the original FX sparked and remind people what Infiniti is capable of. Let's not forget that at some point, Infiniti was able to outsell Acura in the United States, but that was a very long time ago. And I can only wonder if this is a case of what was first, The chicken or the egg? Did Infiniti lose ground to Lexus and Acura because they stopped funding these ambitious projects, or did Infiniti's market share in the United States shrink because of these cool automobiles that people stopped buying, and Infiniti was slow to react with offering a real RX contender back in its day? Infiniti never replaced the FX. What followed was a front-wheel drive with a CVT. More civilized manners, but also very unattractive and suffer from bad reliability. Sadly, today, Acura outsells Infiniti 2-1 in the United States, and Lexus outsells Infiniti 5 times to 1. But what do I know? I can only tell you that right when Infiniti dropped the FX, the market had shifted towards everything SUVs, and most luxury brands went all out in this very segment, car-based, rear-wheel drive platform crossovers that were sport-oriented. Even Ford switched the Explorer from a front-wheel drive to a rear-wheel drive platform for the current generation, along with the Lincoln Aviator. And let's not forget how the Mazda CX-9 was discontinued to make room for the much cooler CX-90 and CX-70. And lastly, how Genesis changed the game with the introduction of the GV70, which keeps stealing market share in the luxury compact crossover segment, with sales that have more than doubled since it was introduced in the middle of the pandemic. So ironically, today, there are actually more contenders in the very segment in which the FX thrived 20 years ago with little or no competition. It is my belief that Infiniti pulled the plug prematurely on the FX, and the idea of Infiniti's bringing it back seems far-fetched, as Infiniti at the moment has bigger fish to fry, such as trying not to disappear altogether. Is there a vehicle today that fills the void left by the FX? I do not think so. But certain vehicles come to mind, nameplates like the GV70 or maybe the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Let me know in the comments if there's a vehicle today that comes close to what the FX was back in its day. And to be honest with you, I feel almost alone in my admiration for the first generation FX, because when I look at used ones online, I cannot find any examples that have been preserved or with lower mileage. So maybe they're not as sought after as I think. The market has dictated their demise, with values rock bottoming 20 years later. What do you think? Do you miss the Infiniti FX? Would you like to see it make a comeback? I know that this format of videos don't bring me a lot of views, and that I may be talking to a very small group of people who are all like me, that were around when Infiniti was a thriving brand that brought cool automobiles like the FX. Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe for more car-related content. My name is Juan Carlos. I'll see you next time.